Pessimism, or belief in the preponderance of misery over happiness in this life, is not a new idea, nor is it a rare belief. To see this clearly, we need only turn to what is now the most followed religion on earth, namely Christianity. It teaches its roughly 2 billion followers that this world we are born into is at its core evil, debased, and corrupt, and hence our real rewards, if any such exist, are not to be found in this life. St. Augustine writes that the whole human race has been condemned in its first origin, this life itself, bears witness by the host of cruel ills with which it is filled. Pascal also says, "We desire truth and find within ourselves only uncertainty. We seek happiness and find only misery and death." Both Augustine and Pascal maintain that if there is any happiness at all in this life, it is happiness in hope, not in reality. But lest we think pessimism can only be found in a religious context, the Enlightenment period affords us some of the most vivid observations on the harsh realities of this life. In part 10 of the Dialogues, Hume, for example, writes, "If pain be less frequent than pleasure, it is infinitely more violent and durable. 1 hour of it is often able to outweigh a day, a week, a month of our common insipid enjoyments." And going back about a century, Pierre Bayle, whose work had an enormous influence on subsequent Enlightenment thinkers like Hume, but also Voltaire, Diderot, and others, in response to the claim that we spend more days in health than in sickness, compares the nature of these to that of dense and porous bodies. Health, Bayle says, resembles porous bodies in that it contains only a small amount of joy in a great extent, whereas sickness resembles dense bodies in that it contains a large quantity of misery in a small space. Accordingly, Bayle suggests that if we had a balance with which we could weigh a disease of 15 days to health of 15 years, we would observe the same thing as when we weigh in the balance a bag of feathers and a piece of lead. Incidentally, Bayle's view of human beings as wicked and miserable supported the view that the perfections often attributed to God cannot be established on any rational grounds. Bayle thus adopts a position known as fideism, according to which religious doctrines are ultimately accepted on the basis of faith and not, as some argue, on the basis of reason or experience. Now, whether Bayle really believed this, that is, whether Bayle genuinely regarded faith as a legitimate way to gain knowledge, is somewhat unclear. Some suspect that Bayle was really wanting to undermine religious belief under the pretext of devotion to God. But the philosopher whose name is associated with pessimism, arguably more than any other writer, is Arthur Schopenhauer. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Schopenhauer's thoughts on this subject, but just to close this video, this discussion, with one example, in the first volume of The World as Will, Schopenhauer writes, "From where did Dante get the material for their vision of hell, if not from this actual world of ours?" So that's all for now, and thanks again for listening.